Good afternoon to everyone present here today. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar for Recovery and Mission SMEs in the Post-Pandemic World. This is the 10th in a series of strategic webinars we have held on governance for micro, small and medium-sized enterprises. Before I proceed, I'd just like to apologise. Usually our webinars, we do have videos of our presenters and myself, but unfortunately, due to technical complications, it's not a tool we're able to make use of today. Hopefully for our next webinars it will resume back to normal, but apologies, and hopefully the presentation can kind of keep you engaged and you can maybe treat us more of a podcast today and listen to us rather than watching. But we decided it would be a shame not to go ahead because it's such a key topic and we've had much interest around the subject. So thank you for bearing with us. To give you an introduction about the Pearl Initiative, I know many of you are familiar with us, some of you aren't. So for those of you that aren't, the Pearl Initiative is the leading and only independent non-profit organisation founded to promote the business case for the implementation of the highest standards in corporate governance, accountability and transparency across the Gulf region's private sector. Launched in 2010 in cooperation with the United Nations Office for Partnerships, the Pearl Initiative aims to convene businesses, decision makers and future young leaders to take the lead in promoting and adopting greater governance standards. The Pearl Initiative also engages with a wider business ecosystem in the Gulf region, collaborating with over 30 regional universities and partnering with over 40 companies to collectively drive our mission forward. We work as a think tank and build data by publishing cutting-edge research reports and case studies to inspire business change. Introducing our program, as I mentioned, the webinar today is being held as our Governance and SMEs program. Micro, small and medium-sized enterprises are considered the backbone of the regional economy and do account for between 80% and 90% of registered companies across the region, but their contribution to regional GDP does remain relatively low. As SMEs compete with each other in a saturated marketplace and strive to be both innovative and fiscally sustainable, they must understand the fact that implementing corporate governance is key to facilitating their growth and success. The Pearl Initiative understands the necessity of good governance for small business success, and in 2017 we launched the Governance and SMEs program to engage small businesses on the importance of corporate governance for positive economic outcomes. Good governance is flexible and can be modified to fit a business's needs, and is not meant solely for the realm of multinationals and larger corporations as is commonly perceived. SMEs will find that applying governance policies and practices will help them build a stronger, more resilient and more profitable business. About today's webinar, we are pleased to have this webinar to discuss the best steps forward for Gulf region SMEs, and as we attempt to move past the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Watching the news these past couple of days, I think maybe we're being a little bit optimistic about looking into a post-pandemic world, but hopefully we'll be emerging out of this crisis very soon. Despite being over half a year into the global lockdown, the current economic condition for SMEs across the Gulf region does remain uncertain, and decision makers are scrambling to put together protections and policies to safeguard the security of small businesses. As MSMEs consider the survival options in the present, they must also consider how they should be pivoting and preparing themselves for the post-pandemic world. With so many changes taking place now, which will almost certainly change future outcomes, how can SMEs prepare for business as usual in the post-COVID-19 world while trying to endure in the present? In today's webinar, we hope to summarise how current challenges faced by MSMEs across the Gulf region will challenge business protocols and outcomes down the line. Explain why MSMEs should implement corporate governance structures in the present to strengthen their business protocols and processes for the future, and analyse the steps that SMEs can take at present to implement safety measures and secure their future in a post-pandemic environment. Leading today's session, we are pleased to welcome Mr. Premchand Kura, co-founder and CEO of Paramount Computer Systems. Premchand has over 38 years of industry experience, including 30 years in the management of technology-dominant businesses. His expertise encompasses startup and profit center management, strategy consulting, corporate sales, channel management, and executive monitoring. He is a parallel entrepreneur who has co-founded several companies in the Arabian Gulf region focused on niche technologies. A prolific speaker, Premchand has spoken at several symposiums and delivered guest lectures in engineering and management institutes. He holds an honours degree in electronics and communication engineering from the College of Engineering Gindi in Madras. Mr. Premchand, thank you so much for joining us today and giving up your time and sharing your insights with the team. As with all our webinars, the webinar is meant to be as interactive as possible, so please do feel free to use the webinar interface to the right of your screen to virtually raise your hand or use the Q&A function to ask the facilitators questions. We will have 15 minutes dedicated to answering your questions at the end of this webinar. So please do take advantage of the opportunity. You do have Mr. Premchand's 38 years of industry experience at your disposal, and I hope you find it valuable. Thanks again to everyone, and handing over to Mr. Premchand to kick it off.
Thank you very much, Yasmin, for that introduction, and thank you to the team at Pearl Initiative for having invited me here, and welcome to the audience. I think both of us are learning something which is very new. I am learning how to speak to an audience that I don't see, and now I think you are learning how to hear somebody whom you are not seeing. But I think change is the order of the day today, and that is extremely important for us as a business. I think particularly it's important to understand what is changing. It is important to understand the rate at which that change is happening, and it is important to understand how one can exploit that change. I think when you marry industry foresight with a very deep customer insight, you will have a business. So even though I come from an industry that has not really been affected significantly by COVID, which I am fortunate that I'm in that industry, I still think that for people who have been affected by the pandemic, it is important for you to look carefully and change. And I think there are enough opportunities that you will find in the marketplace. Now with that, let me get on to a little bit of a storytelling mode, because I think maybe that will be more useful for you when you understand where I've come from, and then I will bring in the relationship with governance. I worked for about 18 years in the corporate world, 7 of which was with a company called Wipro. I began my career with Wipro, and I was really fortunate that I entered the industry on such a brilliant platform. I have tremendous amount of respect for that company even today. And I remember some of the statements made by the chairman of Wipro. His name is Azim Premji. He said one very interesting statement. He said, everything in life can be negotiated except integrity. And I correlate this statement with what Peter Drucker had once said. He said that any organization is only as good as its people. And people are only as good as the quality of their thinking and perception. We can do magic if the benchmarks are high enough. Now, I think this emphasis on integrity stayed with me even after I left India and came to the Gulf. I've now been in the Gulf for the last 30 years. One of the things that I remember when I was thinking about this whole space of entrepreneurship, why not become a small entrepreneur? And I did not have a great amount of money with me because I was always in the working mode. I felt that, you should never, ever sacrifice your dreams at the altar of somebody else's wisdom. You should never, ever build your dreams at the altar of somebody else's tears. Now, when I kept thinking about this, I said one of the most important things is to believe in and to articulate very clearly a value system. And I felt that if you are able to clearly adhere to a value system at all points in time, get people aligned with this value system, it will be possible for you to build an organization. Now, this is what I felt in the late 90s when I embarked on my entrepreneurial journey. So let me explain to you what this value system was that I coined. You know, the value system is clear. C stands for caring. We will always look at win-win transactions now and into the future. So in essence, I was telling myself that if a transaction is not win for the other person, I will not get into that transaction, even if that transaction is win for me. So it is my responsibility to make it a win for the other person. So this was my first important value system that I defined. The second thing is learning. I have believed that, you know, continuous learning is extremely important, and more so when I am in an industry like the IT industry, which is constantly changing. So you have to learn and you have to teach others. And that is why I tell people that, you know, you should be involved only in transactions in which you add value. If you are not adding value, you must be clear about it, and you must tell the person concerned that you are there in that transaction for your own learning value. Now, if you're doing this on a consistent basis, if you're focused on value and you're focused on learning, you will find that change happening automatically. The next important thing is energy. You need to have tremendous amount of energy, and you need to energize others. It is this energy that you bring to the table that rubs off on other people. The enthusiasm, the passion. A stands for achieving. You have to be metrics driven, and you have to measure where you are going. You have to measure where you stand at different points in time. And R stands for respecting. You give respect, you take respect. So what happens is that when you believe in this as a value system, you will be a clear person, clear in everything that you do, and yours will be a clear company. So it's very, very easy for you to sort of explain this to anybody before you appoint a person. And unless a person is married to this value system, he need not actually join. And I have found that there are hundreds of people whom I've appointed over the last 2 decades. And many of them, 80% and above, have remained with me right through these last 2 decades. And that is something that I feel is very, very critical when you run a business of any size. It's not an issue of whether you are small or big. The issue is, are you adding value to somebody else whom you are transacting with in your life? And I also add the word love. You know, love stands for live our values eternally. And love is prem. Prem in the Hindi language is love. Let me come to how the values get married to a governance framework. Now, when you run an organization, the organization consists of people. So even if you are a very small organization, it is important for you to construct a board of directors. Now, the board of directors can have a few people who are working inside the organization, and it can have a few people who are outside the organization. And you must have clarity in your mind as to how all the people on the board are compensated. And I think for a small company, it is relatively easy actually to constitute a good, professional, competent board. I don't think it is difficult. The problem actually occurs with us when we are small. We think that we cannot have a board, and a board must only be there for large organizations. I think it's very, very important for small organizations. Now, when you form a board, let us look at what are the responsibilities really of this board. Now, the board must be involved with defining, if not defining, at least clearly understanding what is the vision of this organization. Where does this organization wish to go? So it's very, very important to have a vision statement. In fact, in our organization, we not only have a vision statement for the organization, we also have a vision statement for people, because ultimately for us in the IT industry, it is a people-oriented business. We are only as good as our people. And if you have to attract talent, if you have to keep that talent with you, and you must have a continuing relationship with the talent even when that talent leaves the organization, I think it is possible only if you are able to clearly define what is your employee vision. And our employee vision goes like this: mounting value for all our employees. We took the word mount from the word Paramount, which is the name of the company. Mounting values for all our employees year on year. And how will we do it? Through customer insight, industry foresight, collaboration, and execution excellence. So we are telling people that we will facilitate through this process the building of new knowledge, new skills, new relationships, and new wealth. So there are 4 parameters on which we are asking our people to measure. New knowledge. Look at what your knowledge is on January 1st. Look at what is the knowledge that you have on December 31st. If there is no change, then very, very clearly remember you're wasting your time. You must go back to your boss and tell him that I think I'm wasting my time. What is it that you can do for me? Or is there something that I have been found wanting? So this is the kind of discussion. It's an absolutely open, transparent relationship. In our organization, we don't believe in hierarchy. Any person can go anywhere in the company. He can talk to anybody in the company. We believe that in the knowledge intensive business, a person must be allowed to gravitate to where the knowledge is, not where the boss is. And the knowledge need not necessarily be with the boss. And that has worked very, very well for the company. Today, we have 175 people in the company. So once you define the vision of the company, articulate that vision, get people excited with that vision. You then need to define a strategic plan. Now, the board doesn't do all this. The board is involved with what is being done. There may be other people. Whoever has the thought leadership will be the leader in that discussion. And that need not be a board member, need not be the CEO of the company. So, but you have a clear understanding. This is the vision. This is the strategy that de-risks that vision. This is the performance management model. This is how we as the board will assess the performance of the company. This is the manner in which the metrics and the reporting happens. These are the people who are accountable for these various line items. And finally, is the organization in compliance to international best practices? If you look at the European Foundation for Quality Management, there is a model for excellence, for business excellence. Or you look at the Malcolm Baldrige model for business excellence. Both are very, very similar. And these are the 2 models. One was adopted by the Dubai Quality Award, and the other was adopted by the Mohammed bin Rashid Award for Business Excellence. Now, we went through this when we were a small 15-member company. Way back in 2002, we got the Dubai Quality Appreciation Award. In 2012, we were the smallest company to get the Mohammed bin Rashid Award for Business Excellence. So it's a clear proof that, size is not really important. What is important is, have you put a framework in place, and do you have a process by which you're measuring your own adherence to that framework? I think this is a very, very, very important aspect of what is called corporate governance. And along with this, when you bring in the whole issue of integrity, I think it will result in the creation of an excellent organization. What I did personally was that while I was involved operationally in Paramount and in the creation of Paramount, which is today the market leader in the cybersecurity space, I was also involved closely in the creation of other entrepreneurs. because I thought that while I was learning, I should also get involved in teaching. So I helped in the creation of a company called Barcode Gulf, which is in the barcoding and RFID and now in the IoT space. And I also co-founded another company called Head Start, which is in the retail ERP space. And in both these organizations, I created about 6 entrepreneurs. All of them are shareholders in the company, so they committed to ensuring the growth of the company. Similarly, in Paramount, I have another 6 shareholders, so about 12 entrepreneurs I created along this journey. And I've enjoyed this. And I think that entire team is married to the concept of having clarity in the vision, the mission, the goals of the organization. And of course, in having a clearly defined value system. One of the things that I want to express at this stage is that I am not prescribing something and telling a person that this is how you must run your life. I'm only sharing with you how I have run my life. And it is up to you to take inputs, I would say, from multiple sources, because everybody's context in life is different. I am a corporate employee, so I have these 10 different challenges. I am a small business entrepreneur, I have these 10 different challenges. I am a fairly large business owner, I have a different set of challenges. So the context for each one of you is very different. So it's very, very difficult for you to hear somebody out, take a content straight away and plant it. I would suggest that you listen to the content from multiple sources and decide what is best for you. At the end of the day, I think you succeed based on your beliefs. If you have a strong belief and if you constantly are in compliance with best practices, you adhere to a value system, a clearly defined philosophy, I think that, you know, COVID or no COVID, nothing on earth is going to actually upset you. Yes, in business and in life, we will all have setbacks. Nobody is going to be there who does not have a setback. Nobody is going to be there who is not going to go through problems. Everything will happen. But the question is not about you falling down. The question is how high you can rise after you have fallen down. So you need that courage to change, that courage to run again. And I think it is important in life to balance everything. The problem actually happens only when we are involved in all kinds of excesses. There has to be a balance. If you look at the financials in any organization, or for that matter in your own life, it is important that you balance revenue and cost. Your cost must never be in excess of that revenue that you are in a position to generate. Whereas we see various people, the way they run their life, the cost is so much higher. And the reason is that they are constantly comparing themselves as individuals or as organizations with somebody else. I don't think you should look at that at all. The world is not a competitive kind of environment in that respect. I think there is enough amount of opportunity for everybody. You need to have an abundance mentality. When you have that abundance mentality, one of the things that will automatically happen is that you will constantly help other people, number one. And number two is that you will find yourself succeeding in the marketplace rather than focusing on, oh, there is this issue with the visa, oh, there is that issue with the bank, oh, there is that issue with the COVID. None of these things will matter to you when you remain very focused on a value system. And this is where I think the whole idea of corporate governance is extremely important for small business. As the board of directors, it is very, very important to have a constant understanding of the vision, mission, and goals of the organization, have a clear understanding of what is the strategic plan that the management has put in place, have a clear understanding of how the performance is measured at different points in time on a monthly basis. If you look at financials, you must have, let's say, a P&L and a balance sheet, even for a small company, because the balance sheet is telling you about the health of the company. The P&L is telling you about the performance. So the performance might be very good, but the health of the company need not be very good. So those are some of the important aspects that you really have to focus on and take accountability for. And compliance to best practices, as I mentioned to you, there are enough number of frameworks in the world, and you can compare your small organization and see how you compare with best practices. See, any organization exists or thrives because of a reciprocal system of trust and faith that people inside the organization and people outside the organization have in the organization. I think the board, and more importantly, the CEO, is the custodian of this trust and faith. Very often people have asked me, Prem, what do you do? And I say, I do only this. My job is only to build and sustain that trust. Now you realize that the moment you talk about trust, your intent must be clear to everybody. Your integrity must be absolutely certain to everyone. Your talent must be clear, and you need to have a track record. When you have all these four, I think trust will then be automatic. We hear this very, very often when you talk to salespeople, for instance. I explained this to the client, but he did not trust me. Now, this is the statement that a salesperson makes. But when you look back, you ask the salesperson, did you check on these four aspects? Did you tell the customer what exactly is your intent? Is your intent to sell him something, or is your intent to help him solve a problem? And you then find that for very many salespeople, the intent is to sell. I think that is fundamentally wrong. It's fundamentally flawed. You can't succeed. In the long term, if you have to succeed, you have to be able to add value to the other person. So this kind of submission, these kind of discussions on an ongoing basis with people, both at the board level, at the management level, and at the organization level, helps you in actually building an organization. And when I say building an organization, it is building a large number of people. And as these people grow, as the numbers increase, you will find the revenue of the company increasing. You will find that you are able to create more value as you go forward. So you're focused on performance, you're focused on value creation, both of which are very, very different. And as part of corporate governance, you will look at both. You will look at whether there is performance, you will look at the health of the company, and you will look at what the value creation is all about. So I think that, corporate governance can be implemented in a very simple way for an organization of any size. Size is actually irrelevant. You can implement the fundamental practices of corporate governance, and you can bring in integrity as the platform on which you will actually build the organization. So this is my humble submission to you. I can only tell you that, following this has helped me. Many people have asked, how do you define integrity? Honesty is one very important aspect of integrity. Honesty is not just integrity. Honesty is one important aspect of integrity. Now, here I think that the moment you decide that this is the way you will operate, there are certain things that you will not do. Come what may, you should not deviate from this policy. This is where integrity becomes so important. There is a very old saying that a man might himself know too little, perform poorly, lack judgment and ability, and yet not do damage as a manager. But if he lacks integrity, he damages people, the most valuable asset of the enterprise. And I think dealing with people is all about integrity. Any complicated negotiation can happen as long as you are clear about the fact that you will not transgress from that integrity line. Personally, it has helped me a great deal. And that is the reason why I'm saying that come what may, if you stick to this and you have a clear framework that you have defined, you can make your small company, which is an entrepreneurial venture, you can make it into a larger company as time passes. Everything is possible. There is enough amount of opportunity in the marketplace. You can look at diversification into different kinds of businesses. You can look at identifying people, because ultimately it is like building an institution. You cannot build an institution, get some good people and put them inside that institution. You can only build an institution around good people. So exciting good people to come and work with you is step number one. And then you will be able to build an institution. So this is what I have to say in totality about the whole space of corporate governance. And my humble submission to you, irrespective of the size of your organization, it is better for you in the long run to focus on the space of corporate governance. And then you will find that whatever be the setbacks that you have to face because of, let's say, some of the wrong decisions that you may have taken as you move along, which is a mistake that we all tend to make. We make wrong decisions. Or there could be challenges like COVID that comes from outside, which is a marketplace challenge. There could be a war somewhere, and there could be a challenge like what happened in Lebanon recently. I mean, all this is possible. Many of these things are not in your control. It happens in the marketplace. But as a person, as an organization, you will be able to meet these challenges head on and grow from there. Provided there is this adherence to a value system, and there is adherence to an excellence framework, and there is a strong corporate governance model that you have implemented in the organization. Size notwithstanding. This is what I wanted to say today. Maybe now we can start taking questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kurup. That was the most scintillating presentation, and we really appreciate the guidance that you have imparted to all our SMEs on the webinar today. By way of introduction, my name is Shruti Sardesai, and I work with the Pearl Initiative on the governance in micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises program. I'm just going to ask you, Mr. Kurup, a couple of audience questions. The first question that's come through is, how and where do I, as an SME, start off implementing corporate governance into my business?
Good question. I would say day one.
Okay, that's pretty good. Do you have any concrete steps?
There is a very interesting YouTube video that you should look at from a person called Sinek. And the way Simon explains is that he says, if you ask somebody, what are you doing? You will immediately get an answer. So the person says, I'm sitting on this chair. Very easily explained, right? Now, the next question you ask him, how are you sitting? And that also he will be able to explain very easily. But when you ask him, why are you sitting? That is when you will find that this person immediately goes back and he's starting to think. So generally, we are first focused on what are we doing, then how are we doing, and then finally only why are we doing. That process has to change. The first thing that you should ask yourself is why. If you have a why, you can always invent a how. You can always live with a what. But that why is extremely important. So ask yourself this question: why are you doing what you are doing today? And then see whether it makes sense for you in your life to change that why. Once that why is very, very clear, you will find that the how and the what follows very, very, very easily. It is not at all difficult. I find a lot of people who want to become entrepreneurs. They love entrepreneurs. When they hear your story, they're just in awe of you. You know, they feel that it is a bed of roses. All that is there, but that is not the reality. But yet they do not take that step. They will only crib. They continue to live in the corporate world, but without becoming an entrepreneur. I'm saying that you must be clear. Why do you want to become an entrepreneur? If you're very, very clear about it, then you take that first step. After that, you will find that the things just fall in place. You don't have to worry. So have a focus on why. Sometimes that why, your answer will be is, no, actually, I don't think I should be an entrepreneur. I'm quite happy being a corporate employee. There's nothing wrong about it.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Kuru. There's a second question that's come through. Do MSMEs need a budget to implement corporate governance?
Not necessarily. I don't think you need to have a budget. I would say that if you're starting from day one and you're starting small, you should always, let's say you want to set up a board of directors, right? Corporate governance ultimately is the ownership of that board. So what you can do then is that you can be one of the directors on that board because you are the entrepreneur. And then what you do is that you get two people from outside, can be from your own industry if that person does not have any conflict of interest, or it can be somebody from outside the industry. Okay, take two people from outside your industry and make them sit on your board of directors and define to them clearly what your expectations are, what you expect them to do, what kind of advice you want. And you can even then, let's say in the initial stage, at startup stage, you are not having money, but there are enough number of people who are willing to do that job for you. There are people who will tell you that, okay, fine, now you don't have to pay me any money, but once you start making money, you pay me in some form. So I don't think budget should be a constraint at all. In fact, I am a member of TIE, that is the Indus Entrepreneurs in Dubai, and the Indus Entrepreneurs have got a nice management structure, and there is a lot of good work that the TIE is doing. One of the things that TIE is doing is a mentorship program. The TIE went and evaluated a few SMEs, shortlisted them. So they had a set of SMEs on one side. They then went to their members and looked at who are the members who would be interested in becoming mentors. And then on one side, they shortlisted, had a set of mentors, then went through a process of tying up a mentor with a company. So now in this mentorship role, what happens is that the mentor is actually giving his services to the mentee for free. But he is doing that as part of his responsibility towards TIE. And what the mentee is achieving today is that tremendous amount of experience the mentee is able to tap into without having to employ a person. So I think any kind of activity that you want to engage in is possible without you having a budget. But again, remember what I told you. You must make things win-win at some stage. It's important for you.
All right, thank you very much. Here's a third question for you. Has corporate governance proved to be useful in boosting investor confidence in your experience?
See, I think corporate governance is extremely important when it comes to a person making an investment in an organization, either in a small part or let's say in buying the entire company. Because unless he has trust in the management, see, whenever you look at an organization, I think at least the first thing that you will look is at the quality of the leadership. And if there are question marks on the quality of that leadership, nobody is going to invest in that company. And there your integrity and trust that you generate is extremely critical. And that is the reason why it is very, very important to have what I call financial integrity is very critical. Even though you are a small company, from the very beginning, you must have an auditor and you must have an audited financials from year one. Now, if you're doing that on a regular basis, what happens is that at the point in time when you want to attract an investor, he will look at your financials and he will understand the integrity of your financials. Right?
Thank you so much. Did you face any challenges setting up a corporate governance framework for Paramount Computer Systems?
No, I did not face any challenge. It was pretty easy to discuss this because everything is openly discussed by us both internally and with the other board members. So the moment you discuss this, everybody will understand. And as I told you, this is all about learning on the fly. None of us are, some superheroes who know everything. So it's all about, excuse me, it's all about discussing openly, understanding the value to the organization, and then going about actually doing the implementation. And when you do the implementation, you define each person's role responsibility, what each person is responsible for. I think it's relatively simple. It's not difficult at all.
All right, thank you very much. In times of crisis, such as this unprecedented pandemic, should companies prioritize business continuity or create a corporate governance framework for the future?
At times of crisis, I remember what Shakespeare said, in one of his, I think it was in his play, As You Like It. He said, "Sweet are the uses of adversity, which like a toad, ugly and venomous, wears yet a precious jewel on its head. And this our life exempt from public haunt, fine tongues in trees, books in the running brooks, sermons in stones, and good in everything." So first understand, don't worry about the adversity. Adversities will always happen. Today it is COVID, tomorrow it will be something else. You must adhere to best practices. You must adhere to an excellence model. You must adhere to corporate governance. You must have financial audits done every year. These are all musts, with or without COVID. And I would add to that saying that you must have a board and a corporate governance model. So COVID should not have anything to do with your decision to set up a corporate governance. Corporate governance is part of that fundamental. See, it's like, I don't know how many of you watch this IPL matches which are going on now in Dubai, Abu Dhabi and Sharjah. And many of these cricketers have not played for the last 6 months. But all of them who are playing well today are the people who have been constantly looking after their basic strengths. They've all been going to the gym at least regularly or having a gym at home. So that kind of a practice is very, very critical. So this is the same thing. Basic hygiene factors in a business you have to focus on, irrespective of whether it is a crisis or not a crisis. It is not that there is a moment in crisis, then you immediately cut. If you have any budget for corporate governance, you cut that budget. No, that's not the way to do it.
All right, thank you very much. And I do appreciate the impromptu recitation from Shakespeare. I really enjoyed that. So we've got a question now again about the pandemic. So given a lot of businesses are facing very different challenges, all of which ultimately feed back into risk management. What do you think a risk management framework looks like, given your experience now during the pandemic as an SME owner?
This is a very good question. I will give you a very simplistic explanation, first of all, for risk, which you have to understand even before you put up a risk framework. Now, risk is defined as, this is a mathematical equation, a very, very simple mathematical equation. Risk is equal to threat into vulnerabilities into value of the asset. So suppose you want to determine risk, you must know all the threats, you must know all the vulnerabilities, and you must know all your assets. You should know which threat will exploit which vulnerability, and you should know which asset has which vulnerability. Once you understand this clearly, you are actually beginning to create a risk assessment model. Once you do that risk assessment, you will be able to clearly say that these are my top 5 risks. Because otherwise what happens is that you will be deluded by a lot of risks. You should be careful not to get worried by that, because ultimately in business, there is a balance between reward and risk. If you focus only on the risk, then that reward will go out of the window. If you focus only on the reward, then the risk will come and hit you at some point in time. So it's a question of how do you establish the balance. That is why in most organizations, if you see a large organization, for instance, risk is always an independent department. The chief risk officer will sit on almost all the major decision-making areas, even though he may not come from that particular business. But he will look at it from a risk angle. Okay? So you can create a simple, very simple framework. You can create an Excel sheet. So you know precisely, you zero in on what are your top 5 risks, and then you have a clear plan. How are you going to mitigate these risks? First of all, ask yourself whether this risk has to be mitigated. I mean, take a simple thing like insurance policy. Somebody may say that, okay, I will transfer this risk to the insurance company. What should that premium be? Now, suppose the premium is a very high number, you may say, forget it. I don't want to pay this kind of a premium. As your CEO or the board, you'll say, I'm willing to accept that risk. I will give you an example of in the field of tennis. Now, in the field of tennis, you've all heard of Wimbledon. Now, the management of Wimbledon decided in the year 2003 that they will pay every year $2 million for pandemic risk. Okay, and take a coverage of $145 million. This is what they did in 2003. So which means starting 2003 until 2020, Wimbledon would have paid $34 million for what they called pandemic risk. And when COVID occurred in 2020, Wimbledon, because it was cancelled, got $142 million from the insurance company. The premium that they had paid over the last 20 years was only $34 million. Now, see what has happened with either the European football or the IPL. Nobody had taken pandemic risk. Not even one sports organization, neither golf, nor football, nor cricket. So you see the foresight of that management. I'm sure that in 2003, when the board decided in favor of taking pandemic risk, many people would have said, why are you taking this pandemic risk insurance? No pandemic is going to occur. So there has to be a balance between the cost of mitigating the risk and your perception of the risk itself and the likelihood of that risk occurring. You balance everything, and of course your affordability. You balance everything and then decide. It's a conscious business decision that you're taking. So it varies from it. It probably won't be important for small business, but for larger organizations, I think it is important to have a proper budget for the risk management process itself. Because as a board, I think there are only 3 major things that the board of directors have got to focus on from a corporate governance standpoint and overall governance standpoint. Number 1 is allocating capital. How will you allocate capital? You have $100 with you. How is this $100 spent by management today? And is there any recommendation that as a board you will make in order to enable the company to grow? This is an important decision, allocating capital. The second important thing that the board has got to do is to mentor the leadership and the management of the company. This is training of the people who are directly reporting into the board. Or it could even be mentoring a few other identified potential long-term leaders in the company. And the third important aspect that the board has to focus on is risk management. So allocating capital, mentoring leaders, managing risk, period. I don't think the board needs to worry about anything else, because the management will take care of the rest.
All right, thank you so much. So we've got two more questions, and I think we can wrap up then. We've got one question that goes, there is a significant gap between practice and what is actually written in many companies' governance framework. Should these organizations go through an audit of corporate governance practices to ensure investor confidence?
Can you repeat that question again? The second
Yes.
part.
Sure. So there is a significant gap between practice and what is actually written in the corporate governance framework of organizations. Should these organizations go through audits of their corporate governance practices?
Yeah, 100%. You must go through an audit. See, it's like you telling me that, Prem, in order to ensure your health, you must go for a morning walk every day at 5:30 in the morning. Please go for a walk for 45 minutes. This is what the doctor is telling you. Now, you know the importance of this. You know how to walk, but you still don't do it. So unless there is an audit that is done, it is not going to come out. So and not only that, in an organizational setting, what happens is that the moment I know that there is an audit that will happen, the chances of me putting into practice all that has been defined in the manual becomes very high. This is one important aspect. The other important aspect, I think, of course, is the role played by the concerned manager. The manager must always understand that there is a best practice manual. There are certain defined policies and processes that have to be followed, and he must follow that, and he must have his own internal audit. That is why finance, for instance, in a large organization has got an internal audit. Even before the external auditor has started his job, the internal audit has completed, let's say, 80%. So I think audit is a very important function that way.
Thank you very much. So the final question is, should MSMEs take COVID-19's pandemic experience for their future survival? What should be the strategy for the future? Because with COVID-19, the world is completely different.
See, this is an interesting question. See, it depends to a large extent on what the business actually is. Now, my personal feeling is that many of the businesses that have been directly affected because people are not going out during the pandemic have slowly started bouncing back. So take a simple case of a restaurant, for instance. I think slowly people have started going to restaurants. I've spoken to a few restaurant owners in the recent past, and they've all said that, business is not normal, but it's okay. It's limping back. The same thing applies to retail as well. So I have a feeling that there are several businesses that are going to come back, and many of them should look at different kinds of models, not just depend entirely on an incoming traffic, go into, let's say, online sales, online deliveries. So you have to implement some changes as a result of the learning from COVID. But that apart, I doubt if there is any small business which probably is going to be wiped out completely. Maybe I don't know, but I can't think of anything. There are a few people who have closed shop during the height of the pandemic, which they had no other alternative, because the moment you say that I'm getting zero sales every day, and if I have to pay the cost of the rent, which is high, and I have to pay my employees, which is high, and therefore I closed, he can still think in terms of reopening because the brand reputation is there. But does he have the financial muscle to do it? That is something that he has to answer. Or should he change from being in the restaurant business to something else? That is also something that he has to answer. See, that is why in financials they say, no, that if you want to really grow, you have to build your balance sheet. So what happens is that the balance sheet is actually telling you about the health of your company. The P&L is telling you about the performance. So you may have a very good performance in a year, but you still may not have a good balance sheet. So it's important to build the balance sheet, build the health. So if you have sufficient money on your balance sheet, then you will be able to take care of, there are some people who may be able to take care of 3 months, some people who can take care of 6 months. There are some people who can take care of 3 years, for instance. It depends on each business, I think. And that's where the board helps. If you have a small board of 3-4 people, you will be able to take this input to that board and then discuss with them. And I'm sure that there will be some good ideas that will come out of it.
All right, thank you very much. That was the last of our questions. I would like to take this opportunity to thank you very much for your time, your excellent advice, and all the expertise that you have imparted to us over the course of this hour. We truly appreciate it, and I do hope that all the SMEs who have attended today can leave this webinar with a sense of, with a sense of pride and hope for the future. Things will get better. I'm sure of it. We're all sure of it, and we're all rooting for your economic recovery. So thank you very much. Have a lovely weekend, and do stay in touch with the Pearl Initiative if we can support you in any way.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the audience, and wish you all the best. As Shruti said, I don't think you need to worry at all. Be careful. You've reached a bend in the road, so you don't need to stop. You can decide, depending upon your current state, decide whether to move slowly and take the curve, or whether you want to move fast and take the curve, either of which is possible. So good luck to all of you. God bless.